He thought his billions made him untouchable. He thought he could humiliate her, fire her, and buy her silence. But what he didn't know. This waitress was about to teach him a lesson that would shatter his world, and you won't believe how she did it. An unforgettable lesson, delivered by an unforgettable woman. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. It was a night that began with a spilled drink and ended with a shattered ego. The soft hum of expensive chatter, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the low thrum of a live jazz band created an atmosphere of exclusive luxury at Ambrosia, the city's most coveted fine dining establishment. Every table was a tableau of wealth and influence, but one table, in particular, radiated an aura of unapproachable power. This was the domain of Victor Sterling, a man whose name was synonymous with tech innovation, ruthless business deals, and a net worth that could fund small nations. Victor Sterling wasn't just rich, he was legendary. A self-made billionaire by 30, he had disrupted industries, acquired empires, and left a trail of astonished competitors in his wake. His face, etched with a permanent scowl that somehow enhanced his rugged good looks, was plastered on magazine covers and financial news channels. Tonight, however, his usual entourage of fawning assistants and sycophantic business partners was noticeably absent. He sat alone, a sleek, black smartphone clutched in one hand, his gaze fixed on some distant, unseen horizon. His perfectly tailored suit, a charcoal masterpiece by an Italian artisan, seemed to absorb the ambient light, making him appear even more formidable. Serving this particular corner of the opulent dining room was Maya Rodriguez. Unlike the crisp, starched perfection of Ambrosia's other staff, Maya carried a subtle weariness in her shoulders, a testament to her 2 jobs, night classes, and the quiet weight of supporting her younger sister. Her smile, though professional, held a flicker of genuine warmth, a contrast to the practiced aloofness of her colleagues. She moved with practiced grace, a ballet of trays and delicate dishes, her mind simultaneously calculating tips, remembering obscure wine pairings, and mentally reviewing her philosophy notes for tomorrow's exam. Her uniform, while immaculate, was a size too big, a subtle reminder of the restaurant's tight budget and her own modest means. Maya had been working at Ambrosia for almost 2 years, slowly paying off her sister's medical bills, and she had seen all types of clientele, the boisterous oil tycoons, the whispering celebrity couples, the silently judging art collectors. But Victor Sterling was a different breed. He exuded an almost palpable disdain for his surroundings, for the very act of being served. He treated the waitstaff as invisible extensions of the furniture, his orders barked rather than requested, his eyes never meeting theirs. Tonight, his mood seemed even fouler than usual. He had already sent back his appetizer twice, complaining about the temperature of the artisanal bread and the unacceptable lack of zest in the olive oil. Maya, ever the professional, had offered apologies and swift replacements, her smile unwavering, her internal sigh unheard. As she approached his table with his 3rd attempt at a starter, a meticulously plated seared scallop dish, her foot caught on a loose floor tile, a tiny imperfection she'd complained about to management countless times. In a horrifying slow-motion sequence, the silver tray tilted. The perfectly seared scallops, the delicate saffron foam, and the tiny sprig of dill cascaded downwards. Time seemed to freeze. The clink of cutlery, the soft murmur of conversations, even the jazz music seemed to fade into a distant hum. All that remained was the sickening splat as the expensive seafood, along with a liberal splash of saffron-infused oil, landed squarely on Victor Sterling's charcoal suit. A large, greasy stain bloomed across his left lapel, spreading like a dark, ugly bruise. A collective gasp rippled through the nearby tables. Waiters froze, their trays held aloft. The jazz band faltered, then stopped. All eyes, now, were on Victor Sterling. His face, already a landscape of discontent, transformed into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, blazed with a terrifying intensity. He slowly, deliberately, rose from his seat, his towering frame casting a shadow over Maya. Maya, mortified, felt a wave of icy dread wash over her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Sterling, I am so incredibly sorry. Are you all right? Let me get you a towel, anything." She fumbled for a napkin, her hand shaking so violently she could barely grasp it. Victor Sterling, however, ignored her outstretched hand. He simply stared at the growing stain, then slowly lifted his gaze to meet hers. His voice, when it came, was a low, dangerous growl that cut through the stunned silence of the room. "You clumsy, incompetent fool," he hissed, his words laced with a venomous contempt that made Maya flinch. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? Do you have any idea who I am?" His words hung in the air, thick with accusation and humiliation. Maya felt her cheeks flush, not just with embarrassment but with a slow-burning indignation. She was tired, she was stressed, and she had just made a terrible mistake. But to be spoken to like this, like she was something less than human, it pricked at her pride. But she forced herself to swallow her retort. "I am truly sorry, Mr. Sterling. It was an accident. I can assure you, the restaurant will compensate you fully for any damages." She kept her voice even, professional, despite the tremor in her hands. Victor Sterling let out a derisive snort. "Compensate me? You think your meager earnings can cover this, girl? This suit is worth more than your entire year's salary, probably more than your pathetic little life savings." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "You know what? I don't want your apologies. I want you to understand the cost of your ineptitude. I want you to know what it feels like to be utterly worthless." Then, he did something that made the blood drain from Maya's face. He reached into his inner jacket pocket, pulled out a thick wad of $100 bills, and slowly, deliberately, began to peel them off. One by one, he let them flutter to the pristine white tablecloth, like fallen leaves, each bill a silent, damning judgment. "That," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the silent restaurant, "is for the suit. Consider it a lesson. And this." He pulled out another bill, a single $100 note, and flicked it dismissively onto the soiled tablecloth, directly into the puddle of saffron oil. "That's for your tip. Now get out of my sight. You're fired." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Maya stared at the $100 bill, now swimming in a greasy, orange pool, a stark symbol of her humiliation. Her mind raced, the implications of being fired crashing down on her like a tidal wave. Her sister, her classes, the bills, all of it hinged on this job. But as she looked up at Victor Sterling, towering over her, his eyes blazing with contempt, a sudden, fierce spark ignited within her. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something colder, sharper. It was the realization that this man, with all his billions, was truly, utterly poor in spirit. And in that moment, she knew, with a certainty that surprised even herself, that she would not let him break her. The aftermath was a blur. The restaurant manager, a portly man named Mr. Henderson who resembled a perpetually worried hamster, rushed over, profusely apologizing to Victor Sterling, practically bowing as he assured him of Maya's immediate termination and full compensation. Victor, his fury somewhat appeased by Maya's public dismissal, simply nodded curtly, then turned his back and stalked out, leaving the crumpled bills and the lingering scent of saffron in his wake. Maya stood there, numb, as Mr. Henderson ushered her into his office. He began with a practiced speech about maintaining the establishment's reputation and unacceptable incidents, his voice a droning monotone. But Maya barely heard him. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, shock, humiliation, and a growing, incandescent rage. "I understand, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, cutting through his monologue. "I accept the responsibility for the accident. But I do not accept how he treated me." Mr. Henderson, caught off guard by her directness, stammered, "Well, Miss Rodriguez, he is Mr. Sterling. A very important client. Being an important client does not give him the right to humiliate another human being," Maya retorted, her eyes flashing. "He threw money at me like I was a beggar, and then he fired me without a second thought. And you, Mr. Henderson, stood by and let it happen." Mr. Henderson squirmed, avoiding her gaze. It's a difficult situation, Maya. The restaurant cannot afford to lose Mr. Sterling's patronage. And I cannot afford to lose my job, Mr. Henderson," she shot back, the frustration bubbling to the surface. "Do you know what this means for me? For my sister?" He offered a weak apology, then handed her a final paycheck, conspicuously devoid of any severance. "I'm sorry, Maya. I truly am. But my hands are tied." Maya took the check, her fingers trembling. She didn't argue further. She knew it was futile. The world of ambrosia, with its gleaming silver and hushed tones, was not built for people like her. It was built for people like Victor Sterling, who wielded their wealth like a weapon. As she walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air hitting her face, a profound sense of despair settled over her. The city lights, usually a comforting glow, seemed to mock her with their brilliance. She had lost her job, her primary source of income. Her sister's next chemotherapy session was in 2 weeks, and she was already behind on the rent for their tiny apartment. The weight of it all pressed down on her, threatening to suffocate her. But beneath the despair, a seed of defiance began to sprout. Victor Sterling had called her worthless. He had tried to crush her spirit with his contempt and his money. But she wasn't worthless. She was a fighter. She had always been a fighter. For the next few days, Maya threw herself into finding a new job, sending out resumes, and going to interviews, but the hospitality industry was tight-knit, and the story of her catastrophic accident at Ambrosia had already spread like wildfire. Rejections piled up, each one a fresh sting. The stress was immense. She barely slept, haunted by the image of Victor Sterling's sneering face. One evening, while trying to distract herself from the gnawing anxiety, she stumbled upon an old, forgotten sketchpad. She had loved to draw as a child, creating intricate designs, whimsical characters, and fantastical worlds. Life, however, had long since forced her to put those dreams aside. But as her fingers traced the faded lines of an unfinished drawing, an idea, fragile but persistent, began to form. It was a crazy idea, a desperate gamble, but in her current predicament, she had nothing left to lose. She remembered a lecture from one of her business ethics classes: the greatest leverage often comes from understanding your opponent's weaknesses, and then using their own strengths against them. Victor Sterling's strength was his reputation, his image of unassailable power and success. His weakness, she realized, was his profound arrogance and his complete underestimation of anyone he deemed beneath him. She spent the next few days researching. She delved into Victor Sterling's public persona, his business dealings, his public relations campaigns. She learned about his foundation, Sterling Philanthropies, which, ironically, claimed to support aspiring entrepreneurs and uplift disadvantaged communities. It was a thinly veiled attempt to soften his image, a PR move designed to make him seem more human. An unexpected encounter further fueled her resolve. While at the local community center, helping out with a food drive, she overheard a conversation between two volunteers. They were discussing a small local bakery, run by an elderly couple, that was facing eviction because a large, anonymous corporation had bought their building and was demanding exorbitant rent increases. The corporation was, of course, a subsidiary of Sterling Enterprises. The bakery, a beloved neighborhood institution, was on the verge of collapse. Maya felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about a pattern of behavior, a disregard for the lives of ordinary people. The seed of defiance was now a determined sapling. Maya started working late into the night, not on resumes, but on a different kind of project. She dusted off her old art supplies, scrounged for affordable materials, and began to create. It was painstaking work, requiring meticulous detail and a steady hand. She poured all her pent-up frustration, anger, and unwavering resolve into her creation. She drew on her knowledge of art history, her understanding of visual storytelling, and her innate talent for observation. She was crafting something unique, something that would speak volumes without uttering a single word. Weeks turned into a month. Maya, surviving on her meager savings and a part-time job at a small coffee shop, toiled tirelessly. She had to be discreet, secretive. Her plan, audacious and risky, relied on surprise. The annual Innovators Gala, a glittering affair held in the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel, was the perfect stage. It was an event Victor Sterling never missed, a public relations spectacle where he reveled in the adoration of his peers and the fawning attention of the media. Maya knew he would be there, holding court, basking in his carefully curated image. On the night of the gala, Maya, dressed in a borrowed, modest dress that blended into the background, arrived early. She had managed to secure a temporary, low-level position with the catering staff, a position so insignificant it wouldn't raise any alarms. Her heart hammered with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She carried with her a large, carefully wrapped package, disguised as a prop for the evening's entertainment. The ballroom was a dazzling spectacle of chandeliers, flowing champagne, and the crème de la crème of the city's elite. Victor Sterling, resplendent in a custom-tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than Maya's entire college tuition, stood at the center of a buzzing cluster of admirers, his practiced smile radiating confidence. He was, as always, the undisputed star of the show. Maya moved through the throng, her movements deliberate, her eyes scanning the room, assessing the best vantage point. She saw the familiar faces of powerful executives, the glitterati, the journalists with their hungry cameras. This was it. Her one chance. At a prearranged signal, a subtle nod from an unexpected ally within the catering team, a large, ornate easel, supposedly meant for a last-minute program change, was wheeled into a prominent position near the main stage, just as Victor Sterling was preparing to give his keynote address. Maya, blending in with the other staff, swiftly approached the easel. With a deep breath, she unwrapped her package. It wasn't a painting, not in the traditional sense. It was a meticulously crafted, life-sized sculpture, intricately detailed and strikingly realistic. The material was unusual, a clever combination of recycled materials and everyday objects, giving it a unique, almost ephemeral quality. The sculpture depicted Victor Sterling himself. But not the polished, powerful image he projected. This was a different Victor Sterling. He was depicted in his immaculate charcoal suit, a familiar, almost identical copy of the one he wore that night at Ambrosia. But on his lapel, instead of a pristine fabric, there was a glaring, unmistakable stain, a deep orange blotch, painstakingly recreated from the saffron oil spill. His hands, instead of holding a smartphone or a glass of champagne, were open, palms up, filled not with money, but with something else, a handful of crumpled, broken promises and the tiny, withered figures of people he had discarded. There were small, almost microscopic figures representing the evicted bakery owners, the struggling families affected by his corporate takeovers, and even a tiny, almost invisible waitress, head bowed, clutching a single, greasy $100 bill. His face, while undeniably his, was contorted into a sneer of contempt, his eyes hollow, devoid of empathy. And perhaps the most jarring detail of all, his head was made not of marble or bronze, but of a precarious stack of $100 bills, teetering on the verge of collapse. The entire sculpture was titled, in bold, stark lettering at the base, "The Emperor's New Clothes, a Portrait of Worth." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Heads turned. Cameras flashed. The journalists, sensing a story, began to converge. Victor Sterling, mid-sentence in his address, paused, his smile faltering as he caught sight of the sculpture. His eyes, usually so cold, widened in disbelief, then narrowed into slits of pure fury. Maya, standing silently beside her creation, met his gaze across the crowded room. She didn't flinch. She simply stood there, a quiet, defiant presence, allowing her art to speak for itself. The message was clear, undeniable, and devastating. The sculpture wasn't just about a spilled drink, it was about the callous disregard for human dignity, the hidden costs of unchecked ambition, and the hollow emptiness of a life built solely on material wealth. It exposed the carefully constructed facade of Victor Sterling, stripping him bare before an audience he desperately wanted to impress. The whispers grew louder, turning into hushed exclamations. People pointed, their faces a mixture of shock, understanding, and a dawning realization. The worth wasn't in the money, but in the humanity. And Victor Sterling, in his gleaming tuxedo, was exposed as utterly bankrupt in that regard. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. Victor Sterling, his face a thundercloud of rage, began to shout, demanding to know who was responsible, who dared to insult him. His security detail moved in, attempting to cover the sculpture and usher Maya away. But it was too late. The images were already being captured, not just by the eager press, but by countless smartphone cameras held aloft by the attendees. The story was already breaking, spreading like wildfire across social media. The narrative of "arrogant billionaire humiliates waitress" was now spectacularly flipped. The waitress, far from being humiliated, had delivered a public, artistic indictment that resonated deeply with a world tired of corporate greed and unfeeling power. The gala dissolved into disarray. Victor Sterling, unable to control the narrative, stormed out, his face a mask of humiliation. The carefully constructed image he had spent decades building had crumbled in a single, audacious stroke. News channels picked up the story within minutes. The sculpture went viral. Hashtags like #The Emperor's New Clothes and #Maya Rodriguez became trending topics. Art critics hailed it as a powerful piece of social commentary, a modern-day allegory of David and Goliath. people debated its meaning, its artistry, and the bravery of its creator. The bakery owners, seeing their story represented in the sculpture, came forward, their plight gaining widespread attention. Journalists began to dig deeper into Victor Sterling's business practices, unearthing other instances of alleged bullying, unfair acquisitions, and a pattern of exploiting smaller entities for his own gain. The Sterling Philanthropies Foundation, once a PR triumph, was now scrutinized, its charitable efforts appearing cynical and self-serving in light of the revelations. Victor Sterling's stock took a nosedive. Investors, wary of public backlash and potential legal challenges, began to pull out. His reputation, once his greatest asset, became his biggest liability. Endorsement deals were cancelled, partnerships dissolved, and his carefully cultivated network of influential allies began to distance themselves. He tried to fight back, issuing a statement dismissing Maya as a disgruntled former employee and calling the sculpture a pathetic stunt. But his words rang hollow against the backdrop of the overwhelming public sentiment. Maya, meanwhile, was thrust into the spotlight. She gave interviews, calmly explaining her motivations, her art, and the broader message she hoped to convey. She spoke not with bitterness, but with a quiet dignity, emphasizing the importance of empathy and accountability. She used her newfound platform to advocate for social justice, supporting small businesses, and raising awareness about the struggles of everyday people against powerful corporations. She received an outpouring of support, not just from the public, but from unexpected quarters. Artists reached out, offering collaborations. Philanthropists, genuinely committed to social good, contacted her, offering grants and resources for her work. The bakery, on the verge of eviction, received a wave of donations and support, allowing them to not only stay afloat but thrive. One day, an envelope arrived for Maya. Inside was a letter from a prestigious art gallery, offering her a solo exhibition. They called her a voice for the voiceless, a pioneer of protest art. Her art, born out of humiliation and desperation, had found its true purpose. Months passed. The dust settled, but the impact of Maya's art lingered. Victor Sterling's empire, though not completely shattered, was severely damaged. He had been forced to settle several lawsuits, make public apologies, though reluctantly, and his carefully constructed image as an untouchable innovator had been irrevocably tarnished. He was still a billionaire, but he was now the arrogant billionaire, the man who had been publicly humbled by a waitress. He became a cautionary tale, a symbol of unchecked power and hubris. Maya, on the other hand, flourished. Her art exhibition was a resounding success, leading to more commissions and opportunities. She established a foundation, not for self-promotion, but to support emerging artists who used their talent for social commentary. She continued her education, not just in philosophy, but also in business ethics, driven by a desire to understand and challenge the very systems that had once almost crushed her. Her sister's medical bills were paid, and they moved into a comfortable apartment, a far cry from their cramped, struggling life. One quiet afternoon, Maya was sketching in her studio, a serene space filled with light and the scent of turpentine. There was a knock on the door. When she opened it, she was surprised to see Mr. Henderson, her former manager from Ambrosia. He looked older, more tired than she remembered. He awkwardly cleared his throat. Maya, I wanted to apologize. For that night. For everything. I should have stood up for you. Maya nodded, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. It's all right, Mr. Henderson. I understand the pressures you were under. He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. You taught him a lesson, Maya. A lesson he'll never forget. And I think, in a way, you taught a lot of us a lesson too. About what truly matters. He hesitated, then added, Ambrosia, it's different now. The staff, they're treated with more respect. Even the floor tiles got fixed. A faint, embarrassed smile touched his lips. A few weeks later, a package arrived at Maya's studio. It was a small, unassuming box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a silver pen, intricately engraved. A card accompanied it. It was from Victor Sterling. The card was brief, almost terse. Ms. Rodriguez. I am informed that this pen is of significant value and is considered a collector's item. I am also informed that my recent actions have caused considerable disruption. Consider this an acknowledgement. And perhaps, a belated apology. For the suit, and for my behavior. I hope you will accept it. V. Sterling. Maya held the pen, turning it over in her fingers. It was indeed a beautiful, expensive object. But it wasn't the pen itself that mattered. It was the fact that Victor Sterling, the arrogant billionaire, had finally, after months of public humiliation and financial losses, been forced to acknowledge his wrongdoing. He hadn't said, "I was wrong," but the gesture, however reluctant, spoke volumes. She knew he would never truly understand the depth of her struggle or the true meaning of humility. But she had made him feel something beyond his carefully constructed world of wealth and power. She had made him uncomfortable, made him vulnerable, made him realize that there were consequences beyond financial ones. Maya smiled. The pen was just a pen. But the lesson? That was priceless. And it was a lesson that Victor Sterling, the arrogant billionaire, would carry with him, etched into his very being, for the rest of his life. She picked up her own worn sketchpad, a new idea already forming in her mind. The story wasn't over. It was just the beginning of a different kind of canvas.